Thanks for everybody for joining us this afternoon. I'm Andrew Flint. I'm the Senior Vice President of Enterprise Sales for VTS. I've been with the company for over 5 years now, so I've been kind of with the business since its infancy. And I'm excited to kind of catch up with everybody around kind of the importance of marketing and kind of how we manage our portfolios. A topic that we kind of discussed in prep for this kind of came up in Mark Roberge's keynote this morning, which I thought was really interesting. And I think it rings true to commercial real estate with this idea that the alignment between sales and marketing is very rarely there in any significant manner in a lot of how we operate our businesses and work with brokerage firms and things like that. I was a broker for 10 years, and that was exactly the case at JLL and GVA Williams. There was very little alignment there. And I think when you think, most brokers probably always thought about like it as arts and crafts, as he said. And it's a shame because I think when you think about it, marketing is really one of the most important pieces to the puzzle of how you brand your business and your assets and things like that. So in an industry where we spend millions of dollars, like how do we know we're doing it right? So we've put together kind of a rock star panel here of three that cover marketing and leasing. So I'll make some introductions here. First we have Eve Chambers, who's the National Director of Marketing for CBRE Global Investors. She's been in the industry for 20 years, oversees 26 million square feet across the, correct me if I'm wrong, but 26 million square feet across the country. I think it's $34 billion worth of assets. And she's got a great vision for kind of where marketing is going because she's part of a really dynamic team at Global Investors that is leveraging a number of new ways to use technology to drive performance. Next, we've got Josh Glick. Josh is the Senior Vice President of Leasing for Vornado Realty Trust. Oversees about 11 million square feet here in Manhattan, which range from just your typical Class A trophy asset here in New York to some really cool, creative projects, ground-up developments here. Really good mind for kind of the importance of that alignment between sales and marketing. So pumped to hear him speak. And then Justin Huebener is the Director of Marketing for Rockefeller Group. Rockefeller has assets across the country, but kind of the core trophy assets here in New York, 1221 and 1271 Avenue of the Americas, both buildings in one of the more high-profile kind of, I think, districts that's been talked about over the past several years on 6th Avenue. Justin is very involved in not just the assets, but the branding of Rockefeller, and prior to that was with actually Equity Office Properties, where Justin and Josh actually worked together on some really cool repositionings, one of which is, I think we'll talk about a little later, the old New York Times building. So as we jump into this, if this is I want this to be an intimate group. If anybody has any questions, feel free to jump in. We want to make sure that we're kind of getting the most out of this. If not, we can do Q&A at the end. But we wanted to jump into, which I think is part of like the theme of earlier, is thinking about your tenant not as your tenant, but your tenant as your customer, right? And the kind of the way that the industry is starting to rethink what marketing actually is. So that's kind of like where we wanted to start here. And I figure, even though this is like a marketing panel, I think we'd start with Josh, the leasing guy in the panel, to kind of everyone here to give their thoughts about like what marketing actually means to them personally and as their business.
I'm up.
You're up.
Okay, thank you. I think, what does marketing mean to me for my portfolio? For me, marketing is, my process is so focused in marketing and design. So without really good marketing, and I'll explain what I mean by that, and really good design, whether it's a building design from ground up or renovation or a pre-built campaign, it's crucial to how I lease my portfolio and how my colleagues and I work together on my buildings. I think marketing for me is less about initially what the collateral is or what things were going to look like. It's about telling a really compelling story. So when I first started in commercial real estate, I felt like everybody used similar firms and they had similar looking stuff, maps, logos. It was about maps and logos and renderings. And that was just what you got. It was a product. But I felt a lot of it was disconnected from a story, and I feel like owners, agents are better off looking at their assets and saying, what's good about this building, whether it's on acquisition or you took it over from a colleague or from another agency, what's bad about this, and really come up with a very well thought out, I call it bunch of talking points, as if you're going on Meet the Press and you have to talk about your building and really study it, really walk the building and understand there's always good things about a project and there's always negatives. And tenants and brokers are sometimes pretty good at pointing out your negatives, sometimes on a tour. And I used to get defensive about them, but it's a lot easier when you agree with somebody. But you may also have a different way of looking at, say you have a column-intensive floor plate. So for me, it's really, getting back to your question, it's really about telling a very strong story. And I start out with the folks that help me on my buildings, coming up with a list of positives and negatives, and then expanding that into a narrative that we have conviction about. And that, to me, is then the basis for, okay, what collateral, if any, do we need to support that narrative? And collateral meaning whether it's marketing books or website or whatever. And then there's the physical environment. How does our physical environment, from start to finish on a tour, that experience tie back to that narrative? And for me, marketing it's like a movie that you go and see, and there's a lot of computer-generated graphics, and they have every single star there, and you have such high expectations, and you walk out of there and you feel like you just wasted 2 hours of your life. Really bad marketing is the same thing to me as a really bad movie, because if you go into a movie and it has a really good story that hooks you, you will forgive the fact that you may not know the actors and actresses. You'll forgive the fact that they may have terrible CGI or whatever it is that you might notice. But you'll walk out of that experience and say, that I feel this way about that, it moved me, or whatever it did to you, and it will have likely some lasting impact. So for me, marketing is, if you start off with like, what logo are we going to use, and what does the map look like? You're like started with a conclusion instead of done your homework.
And you should fire that firm that says that to you if that's their first meeting. So, piggybacking on that, what I think marketing is, it's the presentation of your product to the marketplace, and you in a way that meets your consumer, like where they are. So when we think about, we can talk about our target audience. I mean, it's prospective tenants and their companies, and you need to think about, put yourself in their shoes. A lot of times I think owners miss the mark describing too much what's important to them as an owner. You have to put yourself, reverse that and think about your prospective tenant or on a tour. What's important to your client, and make sure you're sort of meeting them where they are with those concerns about travel time for their employees, or is this floor plate efficient for my tenant type or mix? Or, can I get my employees' dogs in this building? I mean, are you as an owner willing to be creative about working with me and changing maybe your building operations? So what I think great marketing doesn't, like Josh was saying, it doesn't start with graphic design. Great graphic design is certainly a part of that tactical execution, which I think we'll talk about later, about what it means to really execute an idea. But you have to start with that strategy and what is your building today, and do you like that positioning of where your building is in the marketplace? Is there like white space? You're trying to push this building from maybe a garment district building that's on the edge of Bryant Park, but it really could be an up-and-coming tech building. And then how do you change that perception through marketing tools in the marketplace?
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I would also say that we are a catalyst to get that dialogue going, because, sad to say, I can't tell you how many times I've been in a conference room with a broker and I've asked them, okay, what are the key 2-3 things you want your prospect to remember? And you kind of get a blank stare, and then you're like, well, I dominate in the market, or, I've got great amenities, or the location is great. Well, those are things that everybody can check that box. So having that discussion early and identifying what those value propositions are and making that a collaborative discussion so that we all input, we all agree to this dialogue, and we all have a vision walking away of what the goal is going to be. Whether you're a project manager, whether you're an architect, whether you're a leasing broker, whether you're marketing. So that dialogue is important to have, and I think, quite frankly, at least in my experience, marketing is usually the one that's driving it.
I think, I forget what fancy word you used before about collaboration, Flint, but collaboration is, like, if you see yourself as I'm just the leasing person, or I'm the asset manager, they're in marketing, that guy's in development, instead of being on the same team, it sounds really trite, but it's easier to do maybe as an owner. I've been both owner and broker, but I don't look at our marketing team as I mean, they're a different department, but they're crucial to our success, as is our design folks on a new build, as is our development team. So when you sit in a room with people, it's not about what team you're on or what your title is. It's you all have should all have the common goal of being whatever your metric is for success. And I wouldn't be able to do my job effectively. Like, I have a really, really strong marketing department, headed up by 4 really talented, diverse but talented team. And I'm up there, I mean, my assistant jokes I'm up there almost as much as I am with the leasing team, because it's just crucial, from a really, really good tour experience to curating renderings to initially developing that story. And it's a lot more rewarding when it's not just, 2 leasing people sitting in a room, talking past each other. When it's all of us working together, it's a lot more rewarding. Probably a little harder to do in, say, traditional brokerage, because there's always like the top people that monopolize the marketing people's time, and then when you're, not the top people, then it's hard sometimes to get the attention of the talented folks there. But I think it's crucial. I think you're set up for failure. I mean, if I ever ran my own agency team at a brokerage, I would make sure I had a marketing person as a key member of the team. I couldn't do it without it.
That's a good point. I was a broker for 10 years, and to me, marketing was, when I had a new listing, it was, what was the JLL template? And I would typically type in some bullet points, and I'd pull some photos, or maybe go take really bad ones myself. And then just that would be how I communicated with the market. And I think I've learned a lot as I've changed into kind of the software side of the business, how we go about our marketing. We put a lot of thought into it. And I think people don't put enough time and resources and money into this stuff. I think it'd be good to understand from you guys, how much time are you doing it? And I think the cool thing here is no one up on this table really consider themselves on a different team than marketing or the leasing teams. You guys, even if it was brokers, you're on calls with your leasing agents every week. And that was almost never happened as when I was a broker. So
Right.
Begun to understand how has been a change for you guys in your organizations over the past couple of years? How did it take to get kind of buy-in with people that maybe have come from an old guard? Because I think, as people in this room might see, is either there might be a change of the way of thought in their own organizations. What are things that you need to get past?
I mean, for us, it's a very collaborative process. And I've heard that word a lot today, and I think there's a lot to be gained when you have a collaboration of different people and different perspectives. I mean, it really is driven, and it starts with the asset manager, and his vision and his drive is inclusive of everyone who touches that job or touches that opportunity. So it really is something that everyone contributes towards. And again, back to the whole idea of technology being so fast, we're all getting this information now so quickly. If we don't do something with it quickly, we're losing an opportunity. And so, thanks to VTS and Blockview and all these other instruments where you can really visualize a space, or you understand the metrics it takes to fill, 20% of your building, you now don't have to wait months and months and months. You have an aggregate to speak to. Is it a project management issue? Is it a leasing issue? Is it a marketing issue? And because we have all this access so quickly, we all need to act, right? So.
It's interesting. Part of what we talked about too is you've got this idea of how you're positioning your building and branding your building, but I think one of the topics that came up too is how does this tie into the brand of your organization? So I don't know, Justin, this would seem to be like top of mind for you in terms of how you branded not just the assets on 6th Avenue, but also how that tied into Rockefeller. Good to understand kind of your thoughts there as well.
Sure, yeah. So I work at Rockefeller Group of the Rockefeller family, founded in 1928. Came on board as their director of marketing 2 years ago to really help them leverage their brand equity to attract new business. Like a lot of companies, I think, they quite literally relied on the phone to ring to get new business. And for almost 90 years, that worked really well for them. I think they realized, given how competitive the marketplace is, that needed to change. So Rockefeller, we both suffer from, we both suffer from and benefit like a halo effect. We'll always get that first meeting, and someone will always return our phone calls. But when you show up to that meeting, to an investor pitch, or you're trying to raise capital, you need to make sure that you're presenting your projects and your sort of vision for what our development plan is appropriately. We think of brand as really important. It helps us close deals. It helps as you build your brand, which is, I will say, people confuse brand and marketing. Your brand is not what you think it is. Your brand is sort of what the marketplace tells you are. That's maybe like a little heady to think about, but it's you need to maybe set what you think your corporate brand is, and sort of you have to start living that every day. It's not something that changes overnight. It's sort of that brand damage, and we can sort of, you see it in the marketplace with other consumer product goods and United Airlines and what have you, but it's different for a real estate company because your brand is really your product. We talk about like marketing and investing in product, and the brand is important because it can help you close deals. It makes brokers know that you're going to pay their commissions on time. It knows prospective tenants that you're a long-term owner, that you're going to be investing in this building. You know, we've owned buildings for 50 years, and we'll continue to own them for another 50.
I agree with you. I disagree with one part. I think
you're allowed to do that.
All right, good. To
I
me,
used to work for Josh, so it's okay.
There's two brands. Well, we were always collaborated, right?
True. Yeah.
To me, there's two brands. There's the brand of your company. If you're an owner, I can only really speak to this at this point. So, when I was responsible for leasing at Blackstone, I could check off the box that people would come to us and have a very there was already an understanding that there would never be an issue with respect to, because of our personal reputation and track record in the marketplace, that we deliver on time. But funding, TIs, and commissions, never an issue. I experienced it maybe to a different degree when I left and went to Vornado. I felt like, all right, well, I'm kind of playing for the Yankees at working on the Blackstone buildings, and what else is there something similar? And when I went to Vornado, there's an even stronger understanding, given that there's a much longer track record in the market, a much larger portfolio. People know, there's no question, when I look a tenant in the eye on a tour, large or small, if we have to deliver something, they look to their broker, and the broker will say, it's not an issue, it's Vornado. So one of our new buildings that we're building in Chelsea on the High Line, we partnered with we have a JV partner, and prior to us getting involved, the message I think to the street was, we'll build it if you commit. We come into the picture and we say, you have to build it on spec, or you're never going to execute here. And so when I do a tour today, or Glenn or anybody else on our team does a tour, there's no question in the broker's mind, no matter what shop it is, that we're going to deliver when we say we're going to deliver. In that instance, in Chelsea, we'll deliver this December. So we have no problem putting that in the term sheet and living by it in a lease, and it starts from the tour. So there's the brand, which is a really hard thing to establish, and it only works when you do it for a long time, and the folks that are out on the front lines have a credibility in the marketplace. And then you have the brand of your building, and that's distinct. It ties back to how much credibility you have in the marketplace as an owner. But then you have your brand of the building, which is something you have to really, I think, spend time on. It ties back, for me, to the talking points and what's good and or bad that could be shaded or viewed as maybe not as bad about your asset. But that brand that you're representing, okay, for me, One Pen is this. It's been something different to other folks. Or, 61 Ninth, my new building in Meatpacking, is this. Is separate from my Vornado brand, but it's equally as important in communicating to the end user what it is you're trying to sell them.
It's interesting because a lot of it's, I like the idea that your brand is like the confidence of that you can deliver to someone, and I think that is the most important thing when you think about like your customer, right? Of who you're trying to get in your building and keep long term. For you with global investors, that's definitely a core component of your brand as well. But you guys are starting to think about like the overall experience, which seemed to be like a core theme. And you guys have done this whole 5-star worldwide. Right. I think it would be cool for those that don't know about it for you to say kind of like what that is, like why it's important to you and your business, and kind of how did you get people to commit on that, because it was probably a huge initiative that cost a ton of money.
Well, and it's something that, you can't necessarily replicate from building to building, but 5-star really just addresses the culture and really establishes a community. So we have found that, and again, this is through Kingsley, and I think we mentioned Kingsley survey, some of you may be familiar with it, through our annual surveys process. I mean, a third-party independent, consumer reports for commercial real estate. We can really benchmark where we are with tenant satisfaction, with tenant renewals, with likelihood of renewals. So those things do become quantifiable. And if we can say there's a business reason to be investing in these things, it makes sense. I mean, it's a nice touchy-feely thing to do, but it just makes sense. And so I do disagree on one thing that you brought up. Yeah. So I think, we're both from big companies with big reputations and big pedigrees, but I think it's all about the tenant. I think it's all about the tenant, and you're not about who we are, but who we are benefits them.
True. I agree with your disagreement. I don't think I said otherwise, but for us, we're a customer service business. So at the end of the day, like you said, it doesn't really matter unless it resonates with a tenant. For me, the only metric of my success is our signed leases, and the NOI of my building. So, for me, the tour is one of the most exciting parts of the day. If I do a tour, because you look someone in the eyes, you want to make them feel comfortable. You want to understand and listen to them, which is really hard to do when you're also kind of saying, well, look at the view and look at this and look how great we are. But you really, listening is hard to do, but asking them questions to the extent that they're comfortable sharing, and then trying to address what is their concerned about, or what their drivers are and their requirement for us is fundamental.
Well, and that's where 5-star comes in too, because we are now not selling a commodity. We're not selling, okay, this is how many square feet you need, and here it is, and it's this, many minutes to the freeway. We're talking about an experience of how you're going to be successful being in this location, in this particular building, how you'll be able to retain and recruit employees, how you can grow as a company. And again, Nick mentioned it this morning, one of VTS's core values is a customer success. And when he said that, just like ding, 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 that's how we think. So when you find a client, or a partner that's aligned with your mission statements, it works. It works.
I just want to say something before I forget, piggyback off Josh's. The importance of the tour experience, and we talk about teamwork and marketing integration, it's in your operations too. And I'm not sure what the audience mix here, but owners, if you have never been on a tour with your brokers, and make that happen, ask them to pretend you are a prospective tenant and take you on a tour of the building and see what that tour experience is like, because it may be eye-opening for some of you. And the second is to talk about improving the tour experience and making sure your team, everyone from operations to the security guards to the people that run your elevators, making sure that the team is really aligned around one goal, which some people fail to realize. The way we make money, most of us, is by signing leases, and no other way. And I think that we often lose sight of that amongst all this other stuff that's going on. And it starts with the tour, and it starts with that human experience, as Eve was saying. That's that personal connection.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think one of the things I want to jump into here, I think maybe we can dig deeper into that. It's one of those things that, Ryan, who's in the room here, always, represented Josh and Justin on a couple EOP buildings here. And he's always said, you are always the best in the business at creating this personalized customer experience, right? And I think a lot of that starts with how I think it's almost it expands how we define marketing commercial real estate now. It's not just all the websites and image and visuals or branding that you do, but then it caters into marketing is how you're positioning the building when you're on site. But part of that is I want to take a step back too. Is you always get the question of to spend money or to not spend money, and you have a lot of landlords and some that I had worked with in the past that were afraid to put some money into the space or to stuff that could create that tour experience. And I would love to hear you guys thought about that. What's the value of spending $100,000 or even more on making that experience what it should be?
I think if you're not willing, if you work for an owner, you are an owner, work for an owner, or you're the agent for an owner that doesn't want to spend money on all of that, what we're talking about, you're in trouble. And for me, if you were showing space and you're not, I'm going to say the word passionate, might sound corny, but if you're not excited about what it is you're showing to somebody, then why are they going to be excited? And if your collateral, again, whatever that may be, doesn't support your excitement, you've not done your job. And shame on you if you're showing space and you're talking about convector covers or this, blah, blah, blah. And literally people just want to run away from you. Most tenants don't even know what a convector is. So, I've been on tours where I say to my agent, and we have very little agents, and they're all very talented, but every now and then you fall into the trap, I do it too often, where you're talking about stuff and they literally have no idea what you're talking about. So I think if you're showing that you're passionate about your project, and you should be, because you should be spending more time on explaining why it's special and unique and why they should feel good in your space, and to Eve's point, tap into the power, the through line in our business today is retention and recruitment of talent. So if a decision maker feels good about your space tour and about your building, and feels that they're going to be able to, he or she can speak to that point and will support their thesis, then that's the whole game. If you're not doing that, then I'm not sure what you're doing. You're probably talking about convector covers.
Really quick, I don't want to hijack the panel, but I do think this is important because what you guys both just said, and Josh, I do think we should go deeper into kind of creating that experience. But to Justin's point, if you're an asset manager in the room and we've met, you've probably heard this from me, but if you haven't gone on a tour with your broker and find out, not the senior guy, find out who's giving tours of your buildings and ask them with no notice to go on a tour, and I guarantee you, there's a 90% chance that you're going to fall out of your chair and just be like, oh my God. That was alarming. So it was awesome to hear you say that. And I did work with both of these guys and learned a lot. And the attention to detail that they put into a tour, it was just mind-blowing. So I actually do think it would be good for you guys to give some examples. Josh, I think on many occasions has had flags made of the tenant that's coming in to see the space and just hung up on the flagpole, or had crazy signs made. And his philosophy was always if I get in trouble, so what? It was $100, it was $500, it was $1,000, it was $2,000.
Are you videoing this?
Yeah. I do think you guys giving some examples would be really beneficial to this group, because I've never seen some of the things you guys have done before. So it's I think it could create a good conversation.
So we should give away our bag of tricks.
Absolutely.
And then we'll get fired. For me, it's as simple as I had a 100,000 square foot tour today, and started at 10:15. That's usually when I'm jonesing for caffeine. So you get, how many people are on the tour, broker? Well, there are 8 people, so you get 10 coffees and cookies. It makes people feel good right off the bat. When I was trying to get PwC, we were courting PwC to come to 90 Park for a large block of space. Basically, the entire base of our building, we spent $80 million renovating, and we were like, okay, now we actually have to lease the big block of space. We just wanted them so badly there, and we knew that we'd be a good match. The tenants broker was really talented, but wasn't so willing to show their cards, where else they were looking and what our chances were. So you reminded me of this. I forgot that we did this, but we just made a giant PwC flag. We said we had 2 flagpoles. We don't need 2 American flags. We're pretty patriotic. We'll be patriotic on one, and we'll be all about your brand on the other. We want your brand to be married with the brand of this building. We love you, we love you, we love you. And here's a flag. We made it for you. And I was going to hang it on the tour, but your broker was going to yell at me if I did it. So here it is. And the decision maker said to me, why would you make a tour? You're not even on the short list yet. I said, well, we should be. We love you, we love you, we love you. And so we did get feedback from that because the tenant, we ultimately made the deal with them, not because I spent $1,800 on a flag, but it just made them feel loved. And we had conviction that they were the right folks for our block, and it went a huge way with them.
And when they saw 7 different spaces that day,
Yeah.
they remembered yours.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time customizing our tours. The amount that we spend on marketing hasn't changed in the last 5 years, but what we're spending it on has. So we are very, very strategic about who is the right tenant. Why does it make business sense for them to come to our building? How can we prove our case? And then doing all the research before they even come to the building to understand, what makes them go, what makes them successful, what keeps them awake at night. And it's just a series of touch points. It might start with an email blast that's very personalized. For a recent company that we're talking to in New Jersey, REIT Exhibitions, we had, like when you go to a concert and you have like those, or a show, and you've got like the tag. Yeah. So we, gave them the tour, we talked about all this stuff. Then we said, what, we want you to experience what 5-star means. We want your tenants to understand what a day in the life would be here. We're happy to host, a tenant happy hour or a tenant luncheon. If you have some training coming up, let us host it for you. And we sent these customized invitations, like, tour vendor badges to them. And again, everything is thought out. It's not.
Did any of them take you up on it? Because I think that's the greatest thing. It's so disarming. They're like, "What do you mean?"
Yeah,
and you say,
they're always
"Work here for a day."
surprised.
Do they?
Yeah.
No one's ever taken me up on it because they think I'm lying. But if the space is sitting there,
Yeah. You know what? I will tell you the return, the actual return of them doing it is this much, but them remembering who we are is this much.
Right.
Eve, tell them about Insira at the Galleria and the graffiti artist that painted the logo.
So it was basically a white box floor in this office building and in Galleria, and the culture of Insira, this company, is very young and hip, and they're really into street art and punk and all this stuff. So look, it's a white box floor. It's going to get demoed or painted over anyway. So we hired a graffiti artist to come in over the weekend and completely spray graffiti art this whole wall that really looks like Insira. It talks about Insira. When they came through for the tour, they loved it so much. Yes, they signed the lease and they kept the wall as part of their space. So it makes an impact. Yeah.
I think if you guys have more examples like this, and Justin, I think you talked about kind of some stuff that you do, whether it's to get people to your building, but once they're in. But this is like tenants go see so much space. In this day and age, you're just like brokers just shovel space at them, whether it's in just site surveys to, they might see 30 buildings in as they kind of search for their space in the market. It could be 5 to 10 in a single day, and it's really difficult to understand one building from another. So any other examples of how you really differentiate yourself, I think would be really awesome.
Well, Eve, I was going to ask you, what year was that you did that graffiti wall?
Last year.
Because in 2013, I tagged a graffiti wall at a retail project at Bryant Park that was in the Wall Street Journal, and I just didn't.
Oh, you got better press than I did. You got better press.
There was
Good
a
job.
prep question that Andrew had, and this answer is going nowhere, but he said, how do you measure success? And I wrote back to him, I was like, well, when I see other owners copying my work a year or two later, and then it's not that you, Eve, but, you know.
No.
That Razor scooters are like suddenly on tours, and it's like, well, Razor scooters were so 2 years ago on our tours.
Oh my God! No more foosball tables and
Yeah.
No more foosball
so
tables.
here I'm going to plug VTS because if I don't, I won't be able to eat an egg roll later.
You won't get paid.
So you know, there's nothing that beats having decision makers and the folks that shape the decision of whether they're going to lease with you than getting them in your space and having the brokerage community in your space. But you don't always get that. You sometimes, you know, wait for the tour with the decision makers, and 2 of 3 can go, or 1 of 3. It's really, you know, it's really frustrating for agents and owners. And so I'm technology deficient in most ways. I'm just overly caffeinated and know how to do my job kind of in an old school way. But where VTS has been effective for me with 229 and an instance at 90 Park where you send out the video and you can actually see how many times it's getting hit. Sometimes you just know you have the deal. Like I was competing for a deal with one of Jessica's buildings for a tenant out of the Grace building, and I knew I had them when I had 45 hits within the first 20 minutes. So I just, you know, it's a great feeling that people keep clicking through, you know, because it's really hard to, you don't ever see that side of it. And no one really ever shares it with you. Good broker's not going to tell you that because then they're going to lose some of their leverage. But we did that at 229 at Ryan's suggestion, which was the former New York Times headquarters on 43rd Street.
We don't say old, Andrew. It's not the old, it's the former. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, and that was an IAC company that Ryan. I think you were just telling your JLL colleagues it's crazy not to check out this building, even though they only wanted to look at Midtown South, established TAMI corridors, and they ultimately went to lease with us, and it was because, in part, of the ability for everyone to see their future space and the future terrace, and I just did a new deal with the same group for a Vornado building because they got bounced out of the Times building, I guess, for a Snap expansion. But you know that was really worthwhile to us. And as a condition to close that deal, actually, at our last all lawyer session, the head of real estate for IAC looked us in the eye and said, "I have one more thing before we agree to sign a lease with you today." And we all thought that they were going to retrade us on economics. And it was, they wanted us to throw them a karaoke band party for everybody to move to, which you threw, right? You did it. We didn't sing. No. But we have something for you now.
Here we go. 5, 6, 7. Live band karaoke.
But,
Can't
you know,
beat it.
that was something similar to what you're talking about, Eve, where you know, like, this is a crazy thing to do, but it's legal, and why wouldn't we do it?
Right.
And it makes them feel good, and hopefully they'll expand with us and be a long-term partner with us.
Building a relationship,
Yeah.
right? It's not a commodity.
Exactly.
And the other thing with VTS, and you know, it's not just a blatant plug, but
Thank you, though.
It's
Mine
it's
was.
made us all so transparent. Like the information is there. There's no hiding. There's no anecdotal stories from the broker saying, well, you know, it's spring break and so there hasn't been a lot of activity. Or, you know, there's no stories about, oh, well, we ordered some tile and it was back ordered 3 months. I mean, you can see what's going on. And everybody's involved in that conversation. Mark Sakakis, as an asset manager, has the project manager, has the marketing folks, has the operations people, have the marketing people. We all see this information. It's very transparent, and we now have a call for action. And we didn't have that before.
The other piece here, like we've talked a lot about kind of how we think about the brand and the messaging of our building and people coming through, but what are you guys doing to continue to market and build your brand with your existing tenants? Because we all know is like when someone leaves, it costs a lot. You have significant downtime of no rent. You now have to pay, TI money. You've got free rent that you're going to have to give, potentially higher commissions on deals, things like that. What are you doing with your existing tenants to ensure that they stay within the asset or even relocate within your portfolio?
I mean, you have to be all over them years before their expiration and make sure you have it. I mean, for us, we're a long-term owner, so we try to maintain a dialogue with the tenants, whoever is instrumental in the decision-making process. And to the extent that the partnership has worked, you got to work at keeping them. Investing in your assets is a huge part of that. No matter how nice or not nice you are or how good a communicator you are, if you're not investing in reinvesting in your buildings, which my company's great at. We're not afraid to spend money to make our buildings better. We're not afraid to spend money to do marketing because it always pays off, especially when you do it well. And I think that we do it really well. It always pays off. Because the end user and their advisors are very, very sophisticated. From a 2,000 square foot tenant to a 200,000 square foot tenant. And they know when you cut corners, you could see it. And from everything that you do, from tour to response time to retaining your existing tenant base, making sure there's an actual human relationship there and it's not just phone, email, or calling your property manager and having he or she, communicate with the tenant. The communication is the hugest part of it.
I echo Josh's thought. Invest in your product because if you're not, your neighbor is, and they're doing it proactively before the tenant says, "Oh, we're not renewing and we're moving downtown or next door or across the street." So don't wait before it's too late. And then
I would also
you
say
don't have to spend $30 million on a complete rehaul of your lobby,
Right.
especially if there are creative ways to do that.
And everybody contributes. It could be the engineer. We do a full-on customer service training right when we acquire an asset. And everybody's there, the day porter, the security guys, the janitorial crew. They all have, different companies on their badges and on their paychecks because they're represented by different vendors. But what they walk away with from that day is that we are all in this together. We are all part of the success of this building, no matter what we do. And that does communicate, that does come across. And, there's like an authenticity to that I know it's touchy-feely, but you can't duplicate that. You can't fake that. So
it's like you're taking from the hospitality industry, I think.
Yeah.
I listened to this podcast a while back, and it was about the guy who ran the Four Seasons or whatever, and the way that they trained their employees from like front desk to like a dishwasher and the authority they gave them to make decisions to help their customers was far beyond. I think it was like the dishwasher had like a budget of $2,000 to like make a customer happy on site if something was wrong. And it seems like that's kind of what you're bringing to this, which obviously it humanizes it.
It's very empowering. I mean, they've never, for the most part, they've never been even asked, They've never been part of the process. And when they understand that they're part of something bigger, it all falls.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes saying I notice you say thank you to people that we don't really have third party, unless you lease a large block in our building, we generally don't use leasing agents. And all of our building folks are Vornado employees. But, sometimes you say thank you to somebody. Sometimes, unfortunately, a lot of us forget to do that. Sometimes you say thank you to someone on your building team, and they're taken aback, and then the tenant's taken aback that you're, which should be the norm. But that cultural thing is really hard. And I think we all could probably do a better job of that.
So we've got about 10 minutes left. I know we're going to maybe kind of hit on, we gave some specific examples here, but if each person had like a specific case study, maybe it's like something that was really successful in the past or something that you're like implementing right now with like a new asset or development, it'd be great to, again, I think get more like concrete examples on what you guys are doing and what's successful.
Well, we just talked about this. So last year, I think I did all of my leasing through May, and Didn't have a lot more space to lease in my then current portfolio, but we have 2 buildings that we're building on spec, one in meatpacking and one in Chelsea. They're very special. We don't usually do ground up construction. The last time we did that in the commercial world was with the Bloomberg Tower at 731 Lex. So I think I spent almost 6 months curating renderings, working with our in-house team, working with our renderer, working with Gensler on test fitting the buildings that we were building, and developing that narrative. When that sounds like a crazy thing to pay one of your senior guys in your leasing department to do that, but I can tell you that we have so much, I have so much personal conviction about when I do a tour, I want to talk about these buildings. So we have 2 buildings that have no walls, no plumbing, they're concrete slabs. We just topped out today in meatpacking. But the buildings aren't built yet. There's a construction hoist, but they're poured. They'll be built soon. But because we spend so much time as a team, marketing, leasing, executive weigh-in, development team weigh-in, when we do a tour, our materials are so strong that that time really paid off. And I think that will shorten our time to lease up on both buildings as a result. The deep dive study on 61 9th and 512 West 22nd Street is the tour activity that we have, the amount of interest, the people that sit with our books. And we sent a book out to a tenant. Everyone loves to send RFPs today. I don't know what happened to the regular proposal, but sent an RFP. We responded basically with a modified version of our book for one of our new buildings. And the brokers called and said, "This looks like a restoration hardware catalog." And I didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. So I asked them, and they said, "No, it's the client's like head over heels about how it just fits with the overall,
Who they are.
Yeah. And so I can't promise the folks I work for that we're going to lease it in 5.5 minutes, but I know that we've shortened that time as a result of working with talented folks like you guys, because
That's key.
it's huge. It's huge.
What about broker marketing for those type of buildings? Getting brokers and anything to kind of ramp up and make sure that they're bottom line?
I like throwing parties because I like eating and music and talking to people, an occasional beverage. But it's just nice to be able to engage with your extended sales force in a casual way, and you're not presenting, you're talking about the product. Mm-hmm. And so we do that a lot on my buildings.
That's another thing you can start tracking in VTS. I mean, we literally have a whiteboard.
On your parties?
Well,
Like who shows up?
whining and dining and meeting with tenant rep brokers.
Like an inquiry or tour, but you're doing everything else, breakfast, lunches, hosting this event or that event. It would be good to log that.
Well, we have a very competitive group. So our asset managers, month to month, are they generally won't be on a tour if it's, under 10,000 or 20,000 feet. But that FaceTime is critical. So these poor guys are on planes all the time because it really means something to be there in person, to develop that relationship. And so they kind of you've got little notches and, this month Mark's ahead, the next month Jake's ahead. And it's all about making those connections and really getting it done, not just talking about it.
Talk about parties for a second, though. I would encourage you all to forget the idea of what it means to throw a broker party, because that in itself sounds terrible. When you think about hospitality and throwing events in general for your either prospective clients or tenants, think about throwing an event that you would actually want to go to and spend time at. And if you're not a cool person, ask the coolest person in your office to plan this event. And I trust they would be more than happy to. And the return on that investment will be huge.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I'm not a cool person, but I like a cool party. Yeah. I'm kidding around, but
I
it's
did not mean that offensively to anyone, but yeah.
It's crucial because if they're feeling good at the party, chances are they're going to recommend that it's just infectious for them. If they feel good at a party you host or whatever you want to call it. But I agree with you. A broker party is like marketing center, like the 2 words you don't like. It's like, what does that mean? It's just so trite. Like, stop saying those things. We just want an effective means of making people want to lease your space and being a partner with you over the lease term. And so, I think I'm totally in agreement with you. It just getting people in your space and feeling good, whatever that is, and however long it takes. Sometimes it's hard with new construction. I've noticed it's you don't have a curtain wall. It's weather dependent, and you want to show off your building. It's a little hard, so you got to be a little bit more creative. Something that I struggle with a little bit in terms of how do you, if you're new construction shrouded in scaffolding, it's not exactly how you want to go out on your first date. But getting people through the space and spending time there and talking to you about it, and you not talking at them, like we're doing here. But having a conversation is crucial.
I think it helps make the broker part of the story as well, and especially when you differentiate it, it's not just I'm going to get a $50 Starbucks card or something like that, and a bunch of junior brokers, as I did when I didn't make any money and I just want to get drunk or get free dinner or something like that. You make it more than that, then people think about it, and it's much easier for them to bring their tenant and connect with them. So.
Earlier, you talked about the importance of a developer making sure that he was not simply advertising his own strengths, but making sure that he was meeting the needs of the given potential tenant. And I was wondering if you have seen any trends, common trends across various industries, law, finance, tech, of these needs that tenants are asking to be met from developers.
I mean, I would say right now a really hot topic is retention and recruiting. It's right. You want to get the right person. It costs so much money for a company to onboard an employee, invest in them, train them, to have them walk out the door because their competitor is going to throw $20,000 more at them. So that's a huge incentive and something that we can control, right? The environment, the amenities, the mood, the feel. You can't control where a building is located, but you can make that building situated to where people do want to go there. They don't necessarily want to be virtual and sitting at home. So that's what I hear a lot of.
I agree. I think every business, people are not looking at real estate as a means to check a box and I need 40 people and benching. And it's how am I going to use real estate, the choice that I make, better my business, as opposed to it's something you just do. Like I'm just going to rent a car that has 4 wheels and 4 seats, and the choice is directly related to their metric for success going forward. Whether you're a law firm or you're advertising, you're tech, whatever, however you may define yourself, and it's crucial. And I think that's encouraging for folks like us because it's there's rhyme and reason to it. And when you ask someone, what is it important for you to recruit and retain? Like, what are those drivers for you? They've thought a lot about that. And you can respond and say, well, my building can do some of those things, I think, and maybe we can work together on the other things that maybe it's harder, because your building is never going to be perfect. There's always something that someone's going to tell you is wrong with it, even if you think it's perfect. There's no such thing. But I agree. But I think it's just asking them. I'm sure there are tenants out there that just say, I don't care where I am, but I think that's really shrinking, really shrinking.
I'm seeing a focus on amenity lately, and even as I can only speak to New York City and focus on Manhattan buildings, but even as in districts that you think are amenity rich as sort of midtown, it's still not enough. We're seeing prospective tenants ask about amenities within the building, and not just sort of what is our retail mix sort of at ground, but what can I get a gym? Can I get a conference center? Can I get babysitting and a bike room and a place to like shower? And so we have to get creative about using underserved or underused space below grade, or converting existing storage space to maybe provide a potential amenity space for tenants, and even large tenants that are looking to not have to use their square footage, but are expecting ownership to sort of provide that kind of space within the building.
What about sustainability? Is that still a big thing? Aligning the offering with, because I know it's important, but it seems that years ago, being so critical, everyone's talking LEED and sustainability. But now when you're preparing for a tour for a large corporation, how much does that seem to matter to them anymore?
I think it's so ingrained now in large ownership in their corporate culture that, again, it's just sort of a check the box. We could get into a larger discussion about LEED certification and what that actually does and if it's actually useful or not. I'm not going to say my opinion on it, but there are other ways to be more sustainable in a building. But I think we check that box that we can answer to our sort of corporate clients, and that satisfies the need so far.
So the common theme you all have is differentiating your product, non-commodities, right? And great examples, by the way. And especially on a new project, have any of you ever thought of saying, we're not going to go the channel of commoditization, we're not even going to list ourselves on CoStar, and a tactic like that, just kind of going rogue? And what, A, have you done it, and would you guys ever consider something like that?
Come on, Josh.
Justin.
Yeah.
The short answer is there are spaces that we never list on CoStar. So we're launching a new product, 1271, out in the Americas, former Time and Life building. It's not listed on CoStar purely for the fact that we have 2.1 million square feet of vacancy, and we're not taking calls from 25,000 square foot users. And our target audience right now is the list is this big. So that's maybe a real tactical solution to why we're not having something on CoStar right now. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but the short answer is yes. Yeah.
You do anything specific now with like how who that target tenant is? Is it just by size, or is there something else that you're thinking about in terms of who you're going after and then how?
Yes, I mean that's where sort of the relationship gets into play. And yes, we have our sort of target audience list, prospective tenant list from our brokers, but that's also where, and Bill Edwards, who I work for, is now in the room, and you bring into relationships that you have in the industry that there's always off-market deals. And
I've done hundreds of thousands of feet of leasing at Vornado with space that has tenants in it, but you just know from one tenant I need to grow or shrink. That's where maybe the communication, to your earlier question, having constant communication with the brokers and the tenant and the tenants in your buildings. You don't. I mean, 770 Broadway, other than the 20,000 feet I have on today, where I have really good action, I've leased, 400,000 or 500,000 square feet in that building in the last 4 years, and it's never hit CoStar. So it would be hard for us, we're public, where, like I said, a little overly caffeinated and love what we do. It'd be really hard for us not to list our new product on CoStar, have content available. Playing hard to get has never been successful for me and my strategy, or being making brokers' jobs harder is never a good strategy. And having been a broker not as long as Andrew had been, I spent a limited time being a broker. But you have a lot of pressure to make money, and other pressures. You maybe have a lot of assignments, and not being able to deliver people floor plans, renderings, videos, whatever it is that makes their life easier to sell for you is, to me, a real shooting yourself in the foot. So there are probably instances like Justin. This seems like a really a different and smart strategy, because then if you're inundating your leasing staff, internal, external, with calls on deals you're not likely to make, that's just a drain of resources. But I think being aggressive about getting the word out there and maintaining yourself in the brains of all the active brokers is always a good strategy, and it's not easy to do. The size of this market at 400 million square feet is a lot of stuff out there. And sometimes you think you're doing a really good job, and you bump into a major broker, and you start talking about, I'll start talking about a building, and I'll say, I have no idea what you're talking about. And you want to say, how do you not know about this? I've had 4 broker parties, and it's on CoStar. We send flyers out, but there's just only so much bandwidth.
I think we're slightly over time, but we'll do one more question, because I think these are good questions that are coming out here. Duncan?
Yeah, I'm sort of focused on the future. The real estate industry is always reacting. And a lot of times, we sort of don't look to the future and to address specifically each of you individually from a client perspective, what would you do differently if you had, $500,000 today? Looking at the future and trying to do something new, what would you do?
Specific for a user?
I'm sorry, for tenants, prospects. Help them solve their problems. Small amount of money. Call it $1 million, whatever. It doesn't matter.
That's a really open-ended question. You go first.
First thing to come to mind?
We were joking, really big party, but I'm going to be honest and say I don't know. We have 10 million feet around Penn Station, some of which we're actively working on repositioning. In fact, the entire district, and so we're not afraid to spend money to get the word out there. I don't know what the metric is. Never had anyone ask me, maybe because we make good decisions, or tell me I can't do something to promote space.
I will say, back to kind of close the loop on the whole collaboration theme and everyone plays a role. I mean, Global Investors is phenomenal about just brainstorming and welcoming ideas. And no idea is a bad idea. And put it up on the whiteboard, let's talk about it. So there's kind of an environment that nurtures crazy thinking. I'm confident that between all of us, we would come up with the right answer. But again, it's not just my opinion. It's all, like everybody contributes. So I think having an environment in a family types where we're comfortable to talk to each other really makes for good solutions.
That's really important. I would say not being afraid to make a mistake is huge. And it's not really, when I was in brokerage, it's like the last thing you wanted to do. And someone said, you told our client to spend money and it didn't work. But if you have that freedom, obviously it's not your goal, but if you have the freedom to make some choices and some work and some don't, it's a lot less claustrophobic when you have to make decisions.
Yeah.
And if it's part of that process where you're talking things through, I make mistakes all the time, and people are afraid to point that out. And but I learned from them, and it usually don't cost us much money. It's just I should have done it this way. I chose A instead of B. But having that freedom is crucial. And I don't know that that's so prevalent in our culture.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a perspective on that question, nothing. So having been a tenant rep broker for 9 years and an agency broker as well, representing these guys, the pain point and the focus around culture. So we now have 32,000 square feet in Midtown Manhattan. I think probably a lot of you have seen our space over the last couple of days. And we've invested heavily in our space. But we see ourselves both as a real estate company and as a technology company, so we could just justify spending the money on the space, and I think our team absolutely loves it. But it is extraordinarily expensive for most companies to really invest in the things that actually do make a great culture. And this idea of employee productivity is so real. And as a broker and as a landlord rep, you don't realize how real these things are. I think we talked about retention. And so I think we have a lot of the buzzwords. We talk about a lot of these things. But as somebody that's running a 200-person company now where this is just all that matters. And we're in a building now, it's a former Blackstone building that I know Justin worked on. Josh, I don't think you were there at the point, but they invested heavily in just the lobby of the building. And there's a pool table, and they have iced coffee on tap and kombucha. And if you come to our building, I think they really nailed it. And the way that I would describe it is how many people here have gone to a really expensive restaurant where the food sucked? Probably everybody in this room, right? Because I live in New York and I go to them all the time. And you walk away and you're like, I just spent $300 on a meal and the experience sucked. And so I think it's really easy to throw dollars at a problem, but it's also really easy to miss the mark. So what Justin said is find the coolest person to throw the party. I also feel the same way about when you're thinking about investing. So if I was in your shoes and I had another $1 million, I would put it into the building. So when a CEO walks into the asset, it almost feels like you're solving their problem, but it has to be hitting the mark, because so many landlords spend so much money, and you walk in and they're like, we just spent $20 million renovating, and I was like, ugh. what architect did you hire? Because I just want to make sure that they never go near any of our other clients. So I think that's a very real thing. So I think investing in, to the extent that you can invest in the building and find creative ways to make use of space that is otherwise like dormant or whatever it is, I think that solves the biggest problem for anyone operating a business these days. And I just think that over the next 24 months, this concept of the tenant experience and making a building really feel like home and getting employees to stay there or want to live there will be more real than ever. And that's where I would, again, as a tenant, that's where I would want the money to go for sure.
Can I disagree? I would say the best investment we can make is everyone at the table here and in this room have access to some of the best tenants in the world, some of our best customers. All we have to do is go and talk to them. Yeah. Sit down, schedule a meeting, have a conversation, and say what is the most important thing to you today. And if we do that, we're going to learn an awful lot, and it goes to the point of the panel in terms of constantly focusing on the customer and making sure we hear them and listen to them. We have to go and listen to them, and we don't do a great job of it. I think it would make a huge difference, and you would transform your marketing.
I totally agree. I think that was the general theme here is thinking about the customer needs first. Whether they're in your building, you've got two audience, your existing tenants versus your prospects you're going for. And then you can position your building accordingly. So I think that's it. We're done.